we are now going to talk about AI. Yeah, they might change. They might invent stuff. We're going to talk about FSD beta and AI and all kinds of weird, crazy. So, for those of you that don't know, on your right we have Chuck Cook, as he is effectively known on YouTube, Mr. Unprotected Left Turn. Airline pilot by day, FSD driver by night, and whatever else, and a Florida native and Florida native or not? Yeah, were you born in Florida? Florida native and a member of the club. And next to him, John Gibbs, known for his channel Dr. Know It All Knows It All. University professor up in North Carolina. Georgia, apologies.
Oh, man, UGA will not be happy about that one.
Yeah, up in Georgia.
Sorry about that. Next weekend, I apologize for being a UGA professor.
So I'm going to kind of get off the stage and leave these guys to double team and hit us all with whatever you want to talk about.
So first of all, thanks so much, Nick, for putting us up after Sandy. Gee whiz.
Yeah. Woo!
Somebody had to go after him, so there we go. So I think we're going to start by talking about a little detour that I made on the way down here, coming from Georgia down to the Space Coast. So I don't know.
Yeah. So basically, John and I saw each other just a few weeks ago at AI Day in Palo Alto, and we of course got to hang out with his wife Lane and started talking about coming to TeslaCon. Probably formalized the plans. And then I was like, Athens down here. Okay, Jacksonville's close. I'm like, you got to come do the turn with me, right? I mean, it was a little bit of a detour, and you were like, I don't know, it's going to take some time. And then I could almost hear the pause, and they're like, okay, I'm coming.
If my wife can tell you anything, it's I always say no first.
That's
so it's like if you ask a question, I'll say no, and then I'll think about it, and I'll say like, oh no, that's actually a good idea. So
okay.
yeah.
First of all, who knows what the turn is that we're even talking about?
Oh, all right.
Oh, okay. So
That's
it's not
awesome.
as many people as maybe I would have thought.
Right.
So as part of that, and Zeb, I don't know if you can go to the next slide just to show that one first picture.
Chuck, we forgot did you bring a picture up of the release notes?
No,
that's what we should have had.
So basically, John and I jumped into my Model Y, and here we are with the camera, and that's the left turn over to the left there. But basically, this is the unprotected left turn that started getting attention from Elon, the development team, that I kept putting on YouTube and just going, this is really, really a hard problem to solve. And the reason it's hard is because of high-speed, multi-lane cross traffic. The cars that are coming from my left are at about 55 to 60 miles an hour when they're speeding. The limit is right about 50, but it's got a nice long straightaway that both motorcycles and cars love to go nice and over the speed limit. And then it's got an obstruction. That fence you can see right there means the car has to creep all the way out into the traffic to get that B-pillar, which is behind my head, a nice view to the left. That's why it's hard. I kept documenting it. I started putting drones in the air. Matter of fact, you want to go to the next slide there, Zeb. And this is the overhead view, and this is the drone shot I put in most of my videos to show the traffic, the location of the car, how it has to creep from where it is right there at the stop line all the way out. So that's the turn, and it ended up being.
Also, don't forget about the median, because that median is no joke.
Yeah.
If you look at that median, it does not look big enough to fit a car in it, even sideways.
Yeah, which is why they created this, and it's even documented in the release notes for those of you that have FSD beta as the pose. And the pose is it takes a little bit of a right turn and then comes back to the left to go into the median at an angle, which is also intentional to fit into a small median, but it also puts the repeater camera in the best view to see the oncoming traffic back and to your right in this situation so that it can merge into the traffic. And the reason this is a major improvement on .69, which is when this was released, is because it broke a very complex problem, crossing 6 lanes of traffic without a traffic signal into 2 problems of I just got to get to the median, and then I'm going to wait, and then I'm going to merge into traffic. Before, and on any medians that are not raised today, it has to solve both problems at once. It has to find clear from the left, clear from the right, and then it will join. So that is what the engineers that John and I got to meet in Palo Alto worked so hard on this .69 release that created this creep limit and created this new median network that measures drivable space around a raised median. I'm really hopeful in .3 that will extend to non-raised medians. Think of suicide lanes or medians that are just paint only. It doesn't work like that today, but I do think that that is coming in the future. But why don't you talk a little bit about what it felt like in the passenger seat with me at the controls?
Well, I have to say, so he gave me his address, and of course we had the full self-driving driving us there. And as we got closer to it, I recognized the road, a mile or two before we got to your house, and I started to get actually a little bit afraid because I'm like, okay, we have a Navy test pilot who is kind of once in a while going like, ooh, this is scary. And I thought, oh, what's a normal average person like me gonna think? So the experience is, for those who have seen the video, just understand, it's like watching a video of a roller coaster. You can watch it and you're like, oh yeah, that looks scary. But when you get on the roller coaster, you're like, oh, it's a whole different experience. Well, that's what it was like. that creeping, and if it's not quite moving fast enough and there's traffic coming fast, you're like, oh gosh, we're gonna die any minute now.
What I think you actually said on one of the disengagements we had, thank you for stopping.
Yes, yeah. It started to creep out, and so I think we can get into this in just a minute, the details of this, but it started to creep out, and I saw traffic coming, 55 miles an hour from the left, and I was like, we are going to die right now. And he stomped on the brakes, and I said, oh, thank goodness. Hallelujah, we're still alive.
So I'm going to try to put this video together for those of you to watch probably Sunday and then maybe put it out there. I think it's going to be really entertaining, both because John and I are talking, a mile a minute, but at the same time showing this problem from two different perspectives, including the drone view, which I like. But let's touch a little bit on AI Day, and I want to tell the crowd why I was proud to go to AI Day and be invited. And it wasn't for me. It was because when we got, both of us, when we got there and got in there, the engineers ran to us. And it completely caught me by surprise that all of these very, very young kids, comparing them to my age, ran up and were like, can we take a selfie picture with you? Oh my God, this is Chuck from Chuck's Turn. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. You're the guys working on this. And you're coming up to me. I'm here to thank you for what you're doing. But what I got was an insight of a very hardworking young team that is working their butts off and taking every piece of information they can to make the products better and to solve it. I got to meet the guy that said he designed my turn in the simulator. I'm like, that is really, really cool.
I actually didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah,
wow.
I was like, did you get the fence right? Did you get the trees right? Did you get the curb right? And I said, can I see it? And then he said no. So, so that's where it ended. But I did meet the guy that created it. But I don't know, was your sense the same? The energy they had towards what little things we do in social media, how they help them?
The amazement actually started, and this is the truth about this whole thing, was I had asked, or just I thought gently said, hey, does anybody know if I can get a ticket to get into AI Day? And of course, Tesla being Tesla, it got to like 8 or 9 days before the event, and I was thinking, not invited, whatever. I literally got a direct message on Twitter from someone who I'm not allowed to still say his name, but anyway, he just direct messaged me and said, hey, have you gotten my email? And I have this email that I don't check very often because it's just has a lot of junk in it. And I said, no, come on, this is, because he said you're invited to AI Day, and I said, no, I'm not. That's what I thought. You remember, no is the first answer. So I went and I looked him up on LinkedIn and said, oh, good God, he's actually real. And then my brain started to melt because I thought, how did I get into this thing? So it was that experience of not just the engineers, but like some of the upper management team actually knows who we are, which is really mind blowing.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, I would go to these guys they would say, when I was there, they'd say, can I get a selfie with you? And I'd say, I'm the one who should be asking you if I can get a selfie. This is backwards of the way it should be. But yeah, I think of them as pretty heroic. It's not it's a thankless job. I really think, if you get it wrong, then people are like, oh, FSD beta screwed up. And if you get it right, people are like, okay. They don't have any idea how much time you put into making the simulator just for that little intersection right there.
It's fascinating. So I tried to thank every one of them personally. And the other crowd I think deserves a lot of credit is the ADAS drivers. So these are actual Tesla employees that are paid to test drive this software at the dev level. So there's a very tight feedback loop between ADAS drivers and the dev team, and they get out there and drive. Back in April, they started sending them to my neighborhood, and I started filming them for those of you that watch the channel. And they were basically out there 7 days a week, Saturdays and Sundays. They would do a drive between 9 and noon, typically, depending on the driver. They would go back to their probably 3-star hotel, and they would have to document and annotate that drive of data they took, and it went back to the mothership. And then the next day they'd be out there. And my wife was the one that started spotting them. She was like, "Yeah, just walk the dog. The black, Tesla's out there." And like, well, how do you know it's a dev car? Well, it has Texas manufactured plates, driving in a west side of Jacksonville neighborhood, doing circles at the turn. I know it was a Tesla car. So then I started going out there when I knew they were coming because my wife had tracked them down, and I started jumping in front of the car, going, "Hey, stop!" And I'd be like, "Hey, I just want to say hi, thank you for what you're doing." And I gave each one of them a jar of honey from my apiary. I have a beekeeper on the side also. Thanked them for what they did, and I said, "Where are you from?" First one was from Georgia, and then the next one was from Miami. And then the next one, the next week was from New York. And then the next one, the next week was from California. They were flying these people into the airport of Jacksonville. On their app, they went out to the parking lot, got in the same car the guy left the previous week, and then went to the hotel, came, and started driving around. The amount of effort that they were putting towards solving a hard problem, and just like Elon said to me at the shareholders meeting, thank you for giving us a hard problem to solve, because it just started exposing all the little details. So shout out to all the 8S drivers. If any of them happen to see a clip or any of this, there's a lot of people that work 7 days a week on it.
Yeah, they do. They work 7 days a week. It's amazing. Was anybody at the shareholders meeting by any chance? Anyone? Nobody. There we got somebody, one person over there. But Chuck got a standing ovation basically because Elon shouted out to him, and I think the camera didn't pick it up because of the angle. But when we were there, you stood up and everybody was going crazy. It was a very surreal experience. I'm sure for you especially, but for all of us.
I mean, my kids got a kick out of it. That's for sure. But it was a little bit surreal. But anyway.
So, do you want to talk details a little bit? Because I think full self-driving is fascinating.
I do. I think we got to start talking about version numbers, what we expect, where we're going, and what to expect in .3, because there's a lot of anticipation of this next version. What do you think?
So, again, from talking to somebody at AI Day, I feel like I have a little bit of an inside track on 10.69.3, which is the next version. And yes, Elon's going to keep it as 69. something forever, I guess. Anyway, I know, haha, we're all 12 at heart. So anyway. The problem that we were identifying, I was watching, and when you watch, I actually did a little video too, so I'll post something. It's more run and gun than yours is. But anyway, what we were discussing is that there's a limited range that the car can see. And so where it fails is where it sees a gap, because imagine if you had just like a wall of fog, like 50 meters or 50 yards away from you. It's kind of like that. And so that's the limit of its sight. It can't see like a human sees. So what it does is it looks out 50, 60, 70 meters, whatever its limit is. And if it sees blankness, right, it'll see the car and then it'll see an empty space and it starts to go. But the problem is we humans know that just a few more meters away, there's like 10 cars coming at high speed. And so that's when it starts to creep out, and then it goes, uh-oh. As soon as it sees those other cars, it goes, oh no. And that's the moment where you're like, either you got to punch it or do something to get out of there. But the next version of full self-driving, again, I have on good authority, very, very, very good authority, that it's going to be using, it uses an occupancy network, and it's limited. It's like a box that it can see inside. And what they're going to do is go from the 30 by 30 centimeter voxel cubes, and this is very technical, but they're going to go to multi-resolution. So and this is how they can get rid of the ultrasonic sensors too, I believe. They're going to go to very, very minute voxels close to the car, which means it will be able to see things like I'm only a few inches away from the wall or something like that. All the way up to voxels that are huge. The person told me that it can see the sky now. It'll be like giant, imagine as you're close, you have little tiny cubes, right? And then they get bigger and bigger and bigger the further away you get. And then they get really, really big when you get really far away from the car. And so what that will do is get rid of this like wall of fog where it can't see anymore. It won't see at super high resolution at those distances, but all it has to see is like there's some shapes coming at me really fast. And so I'm hoping, and maybe, if they get it out this week, I'd love to come back down next weekend to watch the Falcon Heavy launch, but maybe we can redo, and if we have
redo the turn?
Yeah, if we have 69.3, we can try it again and see if that solves the problem. So I'm fingers crossed.
Yeah, these occupancy networks that they're putting in the release notes now are are brilliant because what they're doing is just recognizing something is there rather than having to label everything when they see it, and then they go label the appropriate things. I don't know if any of you have ever done ML inference networks. If it doesn't know what it is, it doesn't put a box around it. But the occupancy networks put everything in there, and then the boxes around the things that has been trained on, and that the weights can accurately identify to the threshold that they've determined. So it's helping them get the future occupancy state, no matter whether they've identified that or not. If they come out with, something that's never seen before, the occupancy network will at least be able to see that it's there, even if it doesn't know what it is, which is brilliant. And there is an issue around occlusions that the occupancy network is helping. And what they are doing, and they showed us this at AI Day, is they're putting shadow cars behind obstructions that it knows it can't see, so at least the planner knows that there might be something there.
Right.
It's a little bit different than you just defined with beyond the range limit, because they're not putting shadow cars, beyond where it can see. But as they change and these release notes continue to evolve with new technologies, we got to realize there's going to be a little bit of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because each of these new technologies, these new networks, will break a little bit and need to be tweaked. And that's the drive we're marching down, is to help improve it each time they come out with new technology. And then they throw out their nerfs. And so we got a whole other thing that's going to be coming in the future that we're not even using yet, because it's a part of Ashok's plan.
Right.
Can I just ask a quick question? So how many of you have FSD beta today?
Wow.
Wow.
There you go.
Right. That's pretty awesome.
How many of you have never been in an FSD beta car?
Wow.
More people have FSD beta than have. Okay.
Does anybody not know what FSD beta is?
Okay, that's good.
Okay, that's good to know.
We have a good baseline.
Yes, thank you.
We have a good baseline. How about there's a few.
Just one other question. Do you guys think 69.3 is going to be the release that they push to everybody, or is it going to be like how far away are we before?
So first of all, at 160,000 with a safety score of 80, if there's anybody out there with a 79 right now, I actually want you to tell me how you got a 79, right? So 160,000 with safety scores above 80 is probably equivalent to wide release for everybody that took the time to click the button and said, I want it. So I think we're almost there. But to answer your question specifically, Nick, I think that some of the small group of employees and early testers are going to get .3, and then they're going to take some data, then they'll come out with a .1, and then there's going to be a .2, and then I bet around the .2 of .3 is where Elon is going to say, anybody that wants it can have it, and we're doing away with the safety score. But then it introduces the next question of, are there still going to be 2 builds at that point, right? Because I'm still on a 2022.20 build, and many of you are all the way up to 36, I believe. It has some new features. Are they going to align and synchronize those branches at that point where it is wide release so everybody's on the same branch? I don't know.
That's speculation. I don't think with 69.3, but by the end of the year, I think it was right. The target was the end of the year that anybody who wants it can get full self-driving beta in North America. At that point, it would stop making sense to have forked development.
Right, because just like those of you that have Navigator and Autopilot, that's a slider inside of your settings, right? So I envision the end state being, FSD on and off is just going to be like that Navigate on Autopilot beta mode slider. But today, you can't just turn it on unless you download the appropriate build. So everybody needs to have the same build for that slider to work on or off. Otherwise, you're still requesting the download at the VIN level.
That is an interesting question. I've actually thought about that some, because it's very annoying, because for people who don't have FSD beta, you can do that thing where you can move your right turn, left turn thing around the screen, right? Yeah, you can't do that yet, and that's very annoying.
Yeah.
Where it is right now is the worst possible place on the screen, because my hand is covering it, so I'm always having to go like that, so I just don't use it.
Here's another, is anybody waiting for FSD beta for the first time? A couple.
Okay. All right.
What some people don't realize or can't appreciate is that if you're on a build, and let's just say you're on 2022.36, and 69.3 comes out, and it's on 2022.24, you're not going to get it, because very rarely do they, and it's only happened once or twice, they've ever downgraded the build that's on your car in order to give you a lower build. That type of, the amount of file structures that change as they continue to evolve is something they don't do. So to get FSD, you need to be behind us and let the build catch up to you. It's kind of a nuance of software, but I know there's a lot of frustrated people out there that think they're getting ready to get it, but they're actually not on a build that will allow them to get it.
So basically, you should stop upgrading your software.
If you're waiting on beta, that is a strategy to do it, but that's just nuance. So
right, it is. I think one thing that's worth pointing out, and I know
We're doing good.
plowing through the time really fast. But I think it's important to go back to the occupancy networks with Optimus. If you how many people have watched at least part of the AI Day presentation? Okay, so that was the first thing. So most people who watched it would have seen this probably. But the occupancy networks that they were using in full self-driving, they essentially just cheated and took that and moved it over to Optimus. And that was why I was so excited about Optimus. If anybody's watched my videos on it, you saw me like kind of jumping up and Dr. Scott Walter back there.
Scott,
the two of us.
Shout
Yeah,
out.
oh, that guy back there.
There he is.
You're tall, you can't hide. So anyway, the reason I was jumping up and down was because they had built this hardware pretty much from scratch in 4 of these things in a matter of less than a year, and they had transplanted the brain from the car into the robot and made it functional with the occupancy, all the latest stuff that they had. Obviously it was walking around like it was, drunk or something and just working real hard to make sure it didn't fall over. But the point of it was not that. That's relatively the easy stuff. It's the understanding what is going on, where you are in the world, all of those things. That's the hard part. And I was like, wow. So they built a robot and it understands the world and it's able to already transplant the full self-driving stuff into this bot. I'm like, the sky's the limit. I think that this thing is going to develop a lot faster than people think. And I think Elon has sandbagged it a little bit. I think he's learned from like Cybertruck and Model 3 and all of those things. I was talking to somebody who ordered a Model 3 and had to wait 27 months to get one. And we ordered the Cybertrucks, in 2019. And so we're like, it's taking a little while. So I think he's kind of like started under promising a little bit more. But I think TeslaBot is going to take off very, very rapidly.
Yeah. It's also in an easier domain to solve a problem, right? Driving out here with high-speed cross traffic is an unconstrained operational domain.
And different lighting conditions.
And different lighting and weather, and because there's other humans that really are creating situations. I think where they choose to implement Optimus at first, maybe it be the gigafactories or whatever, they can constrain the domains down to very, very simple tasks and continue to iterate there. Taking a car on a road, no matter what, unless it's midnight in a town with no people in it, it's an unconstrained operational domain. So I think it is also an easier problem to solve outside of the motors and actuators and the actual engineering that has to be created.
Well, and that was, again, exactly why I was so excited, because I was like, the hard part is going to be to make something that stands up and doesn't fall down. The easy part, much easier than full self-driving. Also think you're not going 80 miles an hour in this. You don't have TeslaBot running 80 miles an hour. That makes things a lot more critical. If it's only moving very slowly and doing some simple tasks that are relatively slow, there's not that much danger in it going into a fault mode and just saying like, oh, I'm not sure what to do and I'm going to think about it for a few seconds. If a car does that, you crash, and that's a really bad thing. You have a bad day. Or an airplane for that matter.
Yeah. There's a lot of similarities between airplanes and automation, things like that. Obviously, the regulated industry part of aviation is also another thing that Tesla will have to cross into as we ask for approval to eventually go autonomous, whether the platform exists today or in the future. So a lot of parallels.
Yeah.
What do you think, Nick? Should we see if anybody has any questions?
Yeah, I think questions. Let's do questions. We got people. I had a feeling we'd have some questions.
All right.
Pixels for video?
Yeah, so the question is, are voxels equivalent to pixels in video, and that, or still frame images? Yes, that's effectively what they are. And so the problem with voxels is, of course, it's 8 times the information, if I'm remembering right? You have to multiply. So it's 2 to the power of 3. So it's a lot more, processor time, memory consuming to make really, really small voxels. That's the problem. Because you can make small pixels. Well, you probably remember, back in the day in the late 80s, early 90s, a lot of pictures were this big, right? And you blow them up, and they had the stair steps and all that. That was the equivalent of voxels, that aliasing that you see.
And the voxels will have the metadata inside, so a nerve could theoretically turn it back into an image. Right. So all of the metadata is also preserved.
Yeah, pixels are 2 dimensions, right? So it doesn't really matter whether it's video or picture, but they're the square 2 dimension. The voxel is a 3. It adds a 3rd dimension, so it's a volume pixel essentially. All right. Yes, back there.
Yeah. Robotaxi. Do you guys think that the FSD beta cars that we're driving right now will ultimately also be able to be robotaxi cars? And when do you think Robotaxi? What year do you think Robotaxi, the first ride?
So
will
I
happen?
have a personal opinion, and this is totally mine. This has no reflection on Tesla at all. Elon has sworn up and down that Hardware 3 is going to be able to do robotaxis. I think that what will happen is, personally, is that Hardware 3, which is the current computer chips that are inside cars right now, will be allowed to drive. So me, right? So if I enable this and a government regulation body says you don't have to drive the car, that it would be allowed to drive me to work and back and things like that under whatever circumstances they decree is okay. So that I think will be allowed. I do not think that robotaxis are going to be allowed on that hardware. I think it's going to require hardware 4, like a faster generation of processors, more memory, things like that.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I've on the record for this that Hardware 3, I think, is going to be an amazing driver assistance system that will continue to evolve to probably level 3. But I do not feel the camera locations are adequate to solve 100% in an unconstrained operational domain. Now, there are some mitigations they could do by constraining the domain, but Tesla and Elon has said to this point they want it to be able to drive anywhere at any time, kind of thing, not mapped roads, not specific cities, and things like that. Although they have constrained right now up in Toronto, one city, that there is an actual constrained operational domain where it's not allowed to drive. So you could argue that to that point, they have been willing to constrain. So if regulators come back and say, you know what, we'll let you do this in the desert, but we're not you're going to do this in New York City, maybe it could one day get there. But I think Hardware 4 is where they're putting their money, and they're using terms like this third platform for robotaxi and maybe this cheaper car is going to be designed from the ground up as robotaxi.
Right.
I do think that the things that have been said on Twitter over time have given enough confusion. But where it, and how far it'll go, I'll even say at AI Day, those engineers don't know how far they can get it. So it's a little early to say it'll never be robotaxi. So that's an opinion based on camera locations and things like that. But they could also do upgrades in the future that could open it up. So
right. So if you look at the technology right now, the Hardware 4, as far as I understand it, is a drop-in replacement, right? So you just and you wouldn't do it at home, but you could take it to a service center. They'd pop out the old board, put in the new one. And then I think you're right, too, that it might also require the higher resolution cameras if they're in the same location. They have their Samsung cameras that are about 5x the resolution of the current cameras. And so what they might do is kind of offer an at-cost upgrade and say, if you really want the full, like we'll do our best with Hardware 3 and you don't have to pay any money. But if you pay us $1,500 or $2,000 or something like that to upgrade it, we'll put in the new whatever. The camera locations is a really interesting thing because I kind of feel like they're married to that a little bit. They've got so many cars out there with those camera locations.
But they've ordered a high def radar. We don't know where that's going to go, if that's going to be SNX or if it's going to be a Hardware 4 thing. And there's a lot of options in the future. To answer your question.
Hector from Gainesville, Florida. So my question is, because there's so many edge cases, like what you've been showing, what you've been doing, the time spent on it, when is, if Tesla continues doing what they're doing, it seems like it's just going to take a while for them to try to figure everything out. When regulations come into place, government comes into place, could that problem be fixed with construction to prevent issues like where it has to creep out that far? And do you think Tesla and the government would work together? They're going to have all this information with all these edge cases from the entire US. Could you fix those edge cases with changing infrastructure, painting the lines better, reducing the sidewalk? And what do you think?
You're getting into a social United States problem, funding, taxation, where the money goes for roads and all those sort of things. I do think that standards could improve it going forward to say, hey, listen, we need this new standard that to be met across the United States. But then you get into local municipalities and things like that, not the interstate system, and it's so local, I don't think Tesla is going to get in the business of managing, pruning trees, don't build fences there. But I think assisting NHTSA and other agencies to create a common set of rules that do benefit it. So I think Elon's just going to say, listen, we can't change the world, so we need to adapt and learn how to drive in it.
I agree. I think it was Google that was requesting a couple of years ago that we put, we changed like traffic lights and we put not RFID, but whatever, some sort of broadcasting system on all of this stuff and connect up the world. And it's like, well, that's great in a perfect world. And in a perfect world, all of these edge cases could be erased and everything. But that's never going to happen. So, yeah, I mean, maybe by 2060 or something like that, but we'll mostly be old or dead by then.
What was the one quote he used? If a UFO lands in the middle of the road, we need to be able to handle that.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
So I'm a big time early adopter. Tesla's just one example, like all kinds of technologies, like the first iPhone, iPad, all kinds of things over the years. So I'm very optimistic about Optimus, kind of a pun there, but and I think it's going to be great, like you guys said. It's going to be hugely adopted, crazy, thousands, maybe millions in factories around the world. The one thing I'm wondering about, though, and it's not something that makes me negative on the Optimus, just wondering how we're going to solve it. Elon's talked about how it's going to be great for the economy. And sure, for companies, yeah, it's going to be able to save them money. They can run 24 hours a day. They don't have to feed the robot. It's going to be, the scale, the economic scale makes sense. But what about, to me, it seems like there's going to be a huge divider line between white collar workers and blue collar workers in the world as these get deployed more and more. How is that going to be solved?
Oh, okay. I actually think I thought exactly like you did until about a year ago. And all of a sudden I saw Dolly 2 and, Imogen and Stable Diffusion and all of these AIs that were suddenly like, hey, we can do creative work too, right? So I'm actually starting to come around to the opinion that no job is safe at this point. I really think that, the difference between like a thing that's driving a car, actually driving a car might turn out to be more difficult than doing stuff that we thought was very uniquely human, like graphic design or things like that. So yeah, I think AI is coming for all of our jobs.
How is the world going to be a better place if we don't have jobs, if we can't make a living?
Okay, so
maybe that's TeslaCon 2023. We tackle that one. That sounds like it needs a session all on its own.
Yeah. Hey, John. So I have FSD beta. I've done some videos. I have done this chuck turn very similar, 55, 60 miles an hour, left turn unprotected. I keep thinking, Elon says this full self-driving is all about safety, saving lives. And he's talked about this thing called the March of Nines. How many nines do we need before the regulators approve this? Well, I happen to believe, and I've come to the conclusion, I'd like to hear your opinion, that I don't care if Elon comes up with 1,000,000 nines out to 1,000,000 decimal places. If that regulator sits in that seat, John, like you did, and that car starts moving the way it moves right now, there is no way a regulator is going to approve that. How is this camera positioning? I don't see it. I'm with you totally, Chuck. They need better different, maybe up on the turn signals on the front or the headlight housing. They cannot see to the right or the left far enough, even with all these boxes, in my opinion. They're going to have to do something. It's not good enough, right? It scares me to death.
Yeah, there's an interesting counterpoint to this. This wasn't me, and I really apologize because I can't remember who told me this, but it was kind of insightful. He was saying that it's not going to be regulators, it's going to be insurance companies that will dictate this. And I was like, that's an interesting way to think about this. Essentially, the danger to this is the first person who gets injured or killed, whether they're a pedestrian or inside the car or whatever, that's going to be a big problem. But basically, once insurance regulators realize that they will save more money by enabling full self-driving and having... I'll do Sandy's trick, yeah. So, okay, yeah, sorry, thank you. Yeah, I was blocking the signal. So anyway, I think that once, again, I'm not positive that this is true, but the idea is that once insurance companies realize that it's in their own financial best interest to allow these cars to drive themselves rather than human beings, then it's a done deal that regulators will fall in line after it. But I do agree with you. There's a human aspect. Like it's like a driver's test, right? You have the driver test person in the car and you're 16 and you're like, oh, and you start driving and you make a really bad move and you see the person go like, nah, you're like, you just failed. So yeah.
Just failed. Coming from the doctor. I thank you for your point, your comments. I'm glad that we're aligned in the communication of what we're working on, and now your driving is getting across. But there's something to think about with regards to getting an autonomous approval versus a human approval. And let's go through the terms being used about better than an average. Better than an average is kind of, they can do that with data, disengagements, accidents with billions of miles, and they will come up with that. But the point is if you have a 18-year-old son or daughter that goes out and gets into an accident and accidentally hurts somebody because they were tweeting on their phone, that was a human mistake. And then you have a robotaxi make a incorrect left turn and kill somebody. That was a robot mistake. Those two accidents in social media, in the public eyes, and the news channels, with everything, will be treated differently. So there is a higher threshold of perfection that will be required for autonomous vehicles in order to get closer to the average. So, one really, really good drive and one really, really bad drive by FSD could be average. But that really, really bad drive that caused the accident is intolerable. So you have to reduce the standard deviation away from the mean, and it has to be a nice grouping in the middle where better than an average is in a tight group, not without the extremes that we're seeing today.
Okay, we are about to go to a break, but not yet. So I'm going to give you guys 1 minute just to think about how you want to wrap this up. So you'll have a couple of minutes just to wrap it up. So figure that out. While they're noodling on that, I've got 2 announcements to make. One is that because you guys were enjoying your lunch so much, we didn't want to interrupt you with a Michelin Q&A. So I've actually changed the agenda. So we've extended the day by 20 minutes. So just before, so Warren is still going to do the last session, but before Warren's session, we're going to have a tire session. So Michelin are going to come up on stage, and we're going to do a Q&A and everything you wanted to know about tires but were afraid to ask. And then the second thing is a bit of news that you may not have heard. So you can now vote for where you want a supercharger to be. So on the supercharger page on Tesla.com, they've now opened it up for voting. And there are 2 different votes you can do. So you can vote for a place you would like to be added to the map in the future. And then Tesla will tally up all those votes, and the ones that get the most votes get put on the map, and then people can vote for those as to how quickly they should be. And you get 5 votes each time period. I don't know, is it almost a quarter or what it is, but there's 3 or 5 votes. Anyway, don't worry about the details. On the supercharger page, if you want to see a new supercharger somewhere in the Panhandle or whatever it happens to be, check out the supercharger page and add your vote. Okay. Gentlemen, wrap it up.
Well, I'm going to start by asking a question. So how many people think that there will be a Tesla robotaxi, well, driverless, not robotaxi, but that there will be a town somewhere in North America that will allow people, a car to drive without the person intervening by the end of 2023? Okay. How about 2024? 25? 27? Oh, wow. And never. Okay. That's pretty optimistic, actually. No, that's okay. That's cool. I mean, honestly, if you think about it, where we were 5 years ago, 2017, the fact that, obviously this is anecdotal, not data, but it's just interesting to think that we could, it doesn't seem that long ago, 2017, to think that even at the outside, by 2027, most people believe that these cars will be able to drive themselves is pretty remarkable. Yeah, it'd be great if it came tomorrow, but it's really cool that even in 5 years, that could be a thing.
Yeah, and I'll just round out by saying, first of all, thank you. You are the enthusiasts in the Tesla world, and I like to go on the safety pitch and go, you're the ones that are here to get this information. Train the trainers. All of you that are driving FSD, take the time to teach someone that doesn't drive it and tell them how to be careful, how to be safe. You know, we are the ones that are doing these billions of miles of driving, and we got to make sure it goes safely, right? So there's a lot of education and training that you can continue and pay it forward. So I would ask each of you to do that. And the other thing I'll just end is let Elon's team iterate. I know a lot of you paid for FSD a long time ago and feel like you're not getting what you paid for, but just watch what they're doing down in Boca Chica, trying to get us off this planet with a large super heavy booster. They're iterating so fast, just as Sandy said. Allow them to iterate. If that means we need hardware 4, if that means we need new cameras, if that means we go back to radar, let them do it and just realize that we are early adopters and we'll get what we paid for. Arguably, FSD is a large Kickstarter campaign. We paid in early and we're along for the ride. And it's a great call option on the future. So it is coming, but let the team iterate without just beating them up about having to change hardware and say you said this and you have to come true to your promise. I think they deserve that. Thank you.
Yeah,
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.